My beloved child, stop for a moment. Do not let your hand move away from this message yet, because what you are about to hear was not placed before you by accident. Something has been waiting quietly behind the silence, behind the unanswered questions, behind every moment when your heart sensed a truth that your eyes could not confirm. You may have tried to dismiss that feeling. You may have told yourself that you were imagining the connection, exaggerating the signs, or holding on to something that had already slipped beyond your reach. But heaven has watched the nights when you became still, and your soul whispered a name you were trying not to remember. Heaven has seen the way your heart changes when certain memories return. And now, at this exact moment, something hidden is beginning to move toward the light. Your soulmate has been waiting to share something with you. Not for a few hours. Not merely since yesterday. This truth has been living inside them far longer than you realize, growing heavier each time they almost spoke and then chose silence. There were moments when the words reached the edge of their lips. There were times when they opened a message, began typing, erased everything, and stared at the empty screen as though it held the power to decide their future. You were closer to hearing the truth than you ever knew. But every time the moment arrived, fear stood between their heart and their courage. Listen carefully, because their silence was never as empty as it appeared. You interpreted the distance in the only way a wounded heart knows how. You wondered whether you had been forgotten. You questioned whether your presence had ever mattered. You replayed conversations, searching for the exact sentence that might have changed everything. You examined your own actions with painful honesty, asking whether you had been too open, too quiet, too hopeful, too cautious, too much, or somehow not enough. But the answer you were seeking was never hidden in your flaws. The silence did not begin because you lacked value. It began because your presence awakened something inside them that they could no longer control with logic. There are people who enter our lives gently. They bring comfort, teach a lesson, and continue on their way. Then there are souls whose arrival changes the inner architecture of a person. They do not simply become part of a story. They become the moment the story divides into before and after. This is what happened when you entered their emotional world. They may not have recognized it immediately, but something within them shifted. Familiar routines began to feel incomplete. Old dreams lost their color. Conversations with others felt shallow because somewhere in the back of their mind, they were comparing every connection to the unspoken depth they felt with you. And this frightened them. It frightened them because they had learned how to survive without needing anyone too deeply. They had built walls that looked like independence. They had practiced appearing calm when they were overwhelmed. They had mastered the art of stepping backward whenever something began to matter. Before you, this strategy had protected them. It helped them avoid disappointment, rejection, and the vulnerability of being truly seen. But then you arrived, and somehow you noticed what others overlooked. You heard meanings beneath their words. You sensed sadness beneath their laughter. You recognized the difference between their real peace and the silence they used to hide emotional storms. They did not expect you to see them so clearly. Pause here, because this is where the revelation begins to deepen. Your soulmate has not only been waiting to tell you how they feel. That is part of it, but it is not the whole truth. There is something else they have been carrying, something about the moment they realized you were not ordinary to them. It happened when you were not watching. You may even remember the day differently. Perhaps, to you, it was only a small conversation, a brief encounter, an act of kindness, or a quiet moment that seemed to pass without consequence. But for them, that moment did not end when you walked away. It followed them home. It entered their thoughts. It returned late at night, when there was no noise left to distract them. They saw something in you that touched the part of them they had hidden even from themselves. Maybe it was the way you remained gentle after life had given you reasons to become cold. Maybe it was the strength behind your softness. Maybe it was the way your eyes revealed pain without demanding pity. Maybe you spoke a simple sentence that reached an old wound they had never discussed. Whatever the moment was, it created a question inside them: why does this person feel so familiar to my soul? They tried to answer that question with reason. They told themselves it was attraction, timing, curiosity, loneliness, a passing emotional intensity. They gave it every name except the one their heart already knew. But the more they resisted, the more the feeling changed them. They began noticing small things about you. The rhythm of your voice. The way your energy shifted when you were tired. The kindness you offered when no one was praising you. The way you tried to hide disappointment so others would not worry. They remembered details you probably assumed they had forgotten. And one detail became the center of everything. There was a moment when they saw you carrying something alone. You did not announce it. You did not ask to be rescued. Perhaps you even smiled and said you were fine. But they sensed the truth. They recognized that beneath your composure was a heart that had been strong for too long. In that moment, something protective awakened in them. They wanted to move closer. They wanted to say, "You do not have to hold everything by yourself anymore." Yet they remained silent because saying those words would have exposed how deeply they cared. This is one of the truths they have been waiting to share: they saw your pain, even when you believed no one noticed. They saw it in the pauses between your sentences. They heard it when your voice became quieter. They felt it when you pulled back, not because you stopped caring, but because you were trying to protect what remained of your peace. And although they did not respond in the way your heart deserved, your pain affected them. They carried guilt for not knowing how to reach you. They questioned whether their hesitation had made you feel unwanted. They wondered whether they had allowed fear to injure the very connection they wanted most. Do not skip this moment, because the next truth may change the way you understand everything that happened between you. Their distance was not always a sign that they wanted less. Sometimes it was the reaction of a person who felt too much and did not trust themselves to handle it. When they pulled away, they expected the intensity to fade. They believed that time and space would restore control. But instead, the absence made your importance impossible to deny. They began seeing you in ordinary places. A song carried your memory. A familiar phrase brought back your voice. They passed a place and imagined what it would feel like if you were beside them. They heard good news and instinctively wished they could tell you. They experienced difficult moments and wanted the comfort of your presence, even if no words were spoken. Your absence did not erase you. It revealed your significance. There were nights when they lay awake, rehearsing the conversation they wanted to have with you. In their imagination, they finally told the truth without hesitation. They admitted that you had changed them. They confessed that their silence was never indifference. They explained the fears they had hidden and the battles you knew nothing about. In those imagined conversations, you listened. Sometimes you forgave them. Sometimes you turned away. That uncertainty is part of what kept them frozen. They feared that the truth had arrived too late. They have asked themselves a question again and again: what if they no longer believe me? Because they know silence creates its own story. When someone does not explain their heart, the other person is forced to interpret the emptiness. Your soulmate knows you may have built an explanation that does not reflect what they truly felt. They know you may have convinced yourself that you were foolish to hope. They know you may have begun closing a door they secretly expected to remain open. And this is why the words inside them have become urgent. But urgency does not always create courage. Sometimes it creates panic. Recently, something happened that brought your soulmate face to face with the possibility of losing the chance to speak. It may have been a conversation with someone close to them. It may have been a dream that felt unusually real. It may have been a memory triggered by something unexpected. Or perhaps they simply sensed that your energy was changing, that you were no longer waiting in the same way. Whatever happened, it disturbed the false comfort they had found in postponement. Someone may have asked them about you. At first, they tried to answer casually. They may have acted as though your name did not carry weight. They may have offered a vague explanation, changed the subject, or smiled in a way that concealed what they were feeling. But the person listening noticed the shift. They saw the pause. They heard the emotion beneath the carefully chosen words. And then a question was asked that your soulmate could not easily escape: why have you not told them the truth? That question stayed with them. It followed them after the conversation ended. It returned while they were alone. It challenged every excuse they had used to delay the moment. They thought about how much time had passed. They considered how many opportunities had been lost. They imagined a future in which you moved forward without ever knowing what had been in their heart. And for the first time, the pain of remaining silent became greater than the fear of speaking. Yet there is a reason they still have not said everything. They are not only afraid of rejection. They are afraid that once they reveal the truth, nothing can return to the way it was. They understand that honesty changes the shape of a connection. It removes the shelter of ambiguity. It demands a response. It creates a doorway that must either be entered or closed. For a person who has spent so long hiding behind uncertainty, this feels enormous. But your soulmate is approaching that doorway. Heaven is not revealing this to make you chase, force, or wait without living. You are not being asked to abandon your dignity. You are not being told to accept confusion as proof of love. Your heart is sacred, and real connection must eventually meet you in clarity. This message is reaching you so that you can release one burden: the belief that you were invisible, forgettable, or impossible to love. You were never invisible to them. Even during the quietest seasons, they noticed your growth. They sensed when you became stronger. They felt the difference when you stopped reaching with the same urgency. They may not know every detail of what you endured, but they recognize that you are not the same person you were when this story began. Something within you has matured. You have learned that love cannot require you to disappear from yourself. You have learned that longing is not the same as alignment. You have learned that a deep connection may be real and still require truth, courage, and responsibility. This transformation in you is part of what is calling the truth out of them. Before, they may have assumed there would always be more time. They believed the connection could remain suspended between possibility and silence. But now they sense that you are moving into a season where uncertainty can no longer follow. Your spirit is asking for peace. Your heart is becoming unwilling to live on hints. You are beginning to understand that you deserve a love that does not hide forever. And they feel this shift, even from a distance. That is why their thoughts have become louder. That is why old memories are returning with new meaning. That is why they are reconsidering decisions they once defended. They are beginning to see that what they called protecting themselves may have been fear stealing something precious. They are recognizing that avoiding pain did not save them from pain. It only replaced the risk of honesty with the ache of regret. One particular regret has become impossible for them to ignore. There was something you needed from them, perhaps reassurance, truth, consistency, or a simple acknowledgement, and they withheld it. Not because they did not care, but because giving it would have required them to become emotionally visible. At the time, they convinced themselves that silence was safer. But now they understand what their silence may have communicated to you. They realize that while they were protecting their fear, you were carrying the consequence. This realization has humbled them. Your soulmate has replayed that moment differently now. They have imagined what they should have said. They have pictured how your expression might have changed if they had chosen courage. They have wondered whether one honest sentence could have prevented months of confusion. And there is something they want you to know about that moment. They remember it too. You were not the only one affected. The difference is that you allowed yourself to feel the pain, while they buried it beneath distraction. They filled their time. They stayed busy. They acted normal. They may have spoken to other people, focused on responsibilities, or pretended the situation did not matter. But buried emotions do not disappear. They wait. They return when the noise becomes quiet enough. And now the noise is fading. Your soulmate is entering a season of emotional honesty. Life has begun removing the distractions that once allowed them to avoid themselves. The questions are becoming more direct. The memories are becoming more vivid. The truth is pressing against the walls they built. They can no longer pretend that this connection was meaningless, because its impact has continued long after the moments you shared. There is a message they have formed in their heart, even if they have not yet spoken it aloud. It begins with an apology, but it does not end there. They want to apologize for the confusion. For the mixed signals. For the moments when their actions contradicted their feelings. For allowing you to question your worth when the real battle was happening within them. They want to explain that you awakened emotions they were not prepared to carry. They want to admit that they cared more than they showed and feared more than they admitted. But there is another confession beneath the apology. They have been imagining what it would mean to rebuild the connection differently. Not by returning to the same uncertainty. Not by repeating the same pattern. They have been thinking about honesty, consistency, and what it would take to meet you where you are now. They know words alone will not be enough. They know you may listen with caution. They know your heart may no longer open simply because they finally decide to speak. This awareness is why their next step matters so much. They are not only asking, "How do I tell them?" They are asking, "How do I show them that I mean it?" That question has led them toward a decision. Do not assume the decision is simple. There are responsibilities, fears, and circumstances surrounding them that you may not fully see. There may be people whose opinions have influenced them. There may be old wounds that made commitment feel dangerous. There may be a part of their life they believed had to be perfectly resolved before they could approach you honestly. But perfection has become another excuse, and they are beginning to recognize it. The truth rarely waits for perfect conditions. Sometimes the most important words must be spoken while the voice still trembles. Your soulmate knows this now. They know courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means choosing honesty even while fear is present. And somewhere within them, courage is beginning to rise. Quietly. Imperfectly. But unmistakably. You may already be sensing it. Perhaps their energy has appeared in your dreams. Perhaps you have remembered them without warning. Perhaps a calm knowing has entered your heart after a long period of confusion. This does not mean you must interpret every coincidence as a promise. It means your inner world may be responding to an emotional truth that is approaching expression. Something unresolved is seeking resolution. But before that resolution arrives, heaven wants to prepare your heart. Do not meet their truth as the version of you who once begged for clarity. Meet it as the person you have become. Listen without abandoning discernment. Feel without surrendering your boundaries. Allow honesty to be heard, but let actions reveal whether the words carry weight. Love does not ask you to ignore wisdom. A divine connection should deepen your self-respect, not erase it. Your soulmate may be afraid that you have become too strong to need them. But they are beginning to understand that needing is not the goal. Choosing is. They do not want to be chosen because you are lonely, afraid, or unable to move forward. Deep within, they want to know that after seeing the truth clearly, you would still choose to explore what this connection could become. And they know that for you to choose freely, they must finally give you the truth they withheld. That truth includes something they have never told anyone in the same way. It is connected to a promise they once made to themselves. A promise formed after an old heartbreak, betrayal, abandonment, or disappointment. They promised they would never become emotionally dependent again. They promised they would leave before they could be left. They promised they would remain guarded, controlled, and impossible to wound. Then you arrived. Your presence challenged that promise without trying. You did not force your way past their defenses. You simply existed with a depth that made their walls feel lonely. Around you, they glimpsed the possibility of being understood without performing. They imagined what it might feel like to stop running. And that possibility was beautiful, but to them, beauty had often been followed by loss. So they hesitated. They were not choosing between caring and not caring. They were choosing between the familiar safety of emotional distance and the terrifying possibility of real intimacy. For a long time, fear won. But fear has not given them peace. It has only left them with the knowledge that something rare may have been placed before them, and they did not know how to receive it. This is what they have been waiting to share. You were never merely an option in their mind. You became the connection that forced them to confront who they had become. Because of you, they began seeing their patterns. Because of you, they recognized how often they withdrew from what they truly wanted. Because of you, they understood that healing is not simply learning how to live without pain. Healing is learning how to remain present when love makes vulnerability unavoidable. You became a mirror, and they were not ready for what they saw. But now they are looking again. They are seeing not only what frightened them, but what they may have lost by refusing to face it. They are remembering your patience, your sincerity, the moments when you offered understanding without demanding perfection. They are realizing how rare it is to be seen with compassion. And they know they cannot assume that such a gift will wait forever. Something happened recently that made this realization sharper. They learned something about you, perhaps not a secret, but a change. They may have heard that you are moving forward, becoming stronger, meeting new people, considering a different path, or simply no longer speaking about them with the same emotion. The information was small, but its effect was enormous. For the first time, they saw a future where you were genuinely happy without them. They wanted happiness for you. But the thought of having no place in that happiness broke something open inside them. Not because they believe they own your future. Not because they want to interrupt your healing. But because the possibility forced them to admit what they had avoided. They do not want to become only a lesson you survived. They do not want to remain the person who cared silently and arrived after the door had closed. They want the chance to tell you what was real. And yet, there is one final obstacle. There is a truth about their current circumstances they believe you must hear before they can speak about the future. This is the part they have struggled to explain. It is the reason they have started and deleted messages. It is the reason every imagined conversation becomes more complicated after the first confession. They know that saying, "I care," is only the beginning. They must also explain what has kept them bound, what decision they have been delaying, and why your name has become connected to a choice that could change more than one life. You have sensed that there was more beneath the surface. You were right. But do not let fear fill the space before truth arrives. This hidden circumstance is not being revealed to frighten you. It is being brought forward because clarity is approaching. What has remained vague cannot stay vague forever. What has lived in shadow is moving toward a moment of decision. Your soulmate is closer to that decision than they have ever been. They have already begun doing something differently. Quietly, they are preparing. They may be organizing their thoughts, closing an old chapter, seeking advice, or gathering the courage to approach you with honesty instead of emotional fragments. To the outside world, nothing may appear to have changed. But within them, the old pattern is losing its power. They have reached the point where silence no longer feels like protection. It feels like betrayal. A betrayal of their own heart. A betrayal of what they felt. A betrayal of the connection that continued to matter even when they pretended otherwise. And this realization has placed them before a choice they can no longer postpone. They must either speak, or accept that you may never know. But there is something they discovered just before making that choice, something connected to you, to the past, and to a conversation you were never meant to hear. Someone close to them finally revealed what they had noticed from the very beginning. Your soulmate expected advice, but instead they heard a sentence that left them completely silent. The sentence was about the way you looked at them the last time you were together. It suggested that you had been hiding a truth of your own. And now, before your soulmate can finally share what they have carried for so long, they need to know whether that hidden truth is still alive inside your heart. Because what they are preparing to reveal next could change the meaning of every silence, every separation, and every moment you believed the story had already ended.